this is Vicki Romaine with Cheerful Greetings, and today we're going to make some pockets or bags with our pages from a small Sears and Roebuck catalog. And first I'm going to pull out some pages here that I want to use. One that will have nothing but writing on it, and then a couple of them will have these pictures of items being advertised for sale. So they'll have some pictures. And we shall put the book aside. And in this video, I will use the scraps that I made from the last video, 219, on my little pockets or bags. And the reason I say both is because you can use it for either one. What I'm doing now is trimming off some of the white border on the side. And sometimes when you only have a small area to tear, it doesn't tear very well. So we shall work on it some more, and this came out pretty well considering my margin wasn't very large. Also, sometimes it's hard to tear a book page when the pages are real old. And you can tell by looking at these that these are definitely old vintage pages. And if I can't get a tear like I want, I'm going to take my scissors now and just trim off that extra little bit. But the majority of the page will be torn like I want. And that's the appearance that I want. Now the bottom of my page still has a little margin on it, so I'm going to tear it off also. And hopefully this will tear a little better. There we go. Now I have a piece of parchment paper. I'm going to kind of get a rough estimate of size, and I don't want it to go all the way to the top. So I'm going to see what direction on the parchment paper I'm going to use. Then I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut me a piece of parchment paper a little larger than the book page that I have here. I'm not going to worry about whether or not it's straight or if it's a ragged cut. I just want to get my parchment paper down to size. When it's too big, it's hard to work with. And so that I see this will fit over my book page just fine. Parchment paper. And the main thing is I want to make sure it is straight across at the top. In other words, I don't want it on crooked. The outer edges can be crooked, but not across the top. I don't have any sewing pins with me or anything like that, so I'm just using a paper clip to hold it. And these are just regular paper clips. And I'm using it like I were to put two pieces of paper together. And instead of paper, I'm using a book page and a piece of parchment paper. When I do my tutorials, I also like to show the mistakes I make. And here's one right here. If you notice, I flipped my book page around. I had it upside down. Now, I'm going to be turning the top over, and that part will be upside down. But that won't matter because you'll see what I'm going to do with it in a little while. So you want to make sure that your book page is right side up. So we're taking the paper clip again and going to put it back on. Two pieces here to hold. There we go. As you can see now, the book page is right side up. Now I'm going to take the top and I'm going to fold it down just over top of the book page, over top of the parchment paper. So I want to make sure that it covers the top of the parchment paper. And what I've done here was I'm just kind of playing with it a little bit. And there's one of those pieces of white cardstock scrap that I made in the last video. And you can see that I will be putting them on the top of my little pocket or bag, whichever you want to call it. And what I'm doing here is looking through to see if I see another one that I like better. And that one I kind of like. So I'm just kind of playing with it right now to see what I'm going to be doing. And I have chosen this one to be at the top. Okay, I'm going to be putting this up above me now and put it aside. I will be doing some more work to it in a few minutes. But in the meantime, I'm going to get another piece of book page and I'm going to rip the margins off of it. And if you will notice that I have a metal ruler and that I have it upside down. I find that if you have that piece of metal that sticks out just a little further than the cork, that it tears your book page much better. Again, I am taking a piece of parchment paper and I'm putting it in front of my book page. And this page, if you notice, is the one with all the writing. The one I worked with previously has some of the pictures of items that are being sold at the on the catalog. So I'm trying to decide if this parchment paper is large enough, and I think it is. And I'll be bending the top down. I'm not using any definite measurements on these. What I am doing is making sure my fold is down the row of a group of words, other words, and making sure it's even. And I want to make sure that my parchment paper is even at the top also. And I'm looking again at my little scraps that we worked with last time, and I think I'm going to go with this one. I have a number of them here that I can choose from, and I have all sorts of choices. So it's hard for me to decide now which one I want to use. I kind of like this bright one. I really like this one with the flowers on it. And I think that's probably the one I'll go with. But then again, I like all the orange colors here with the book page. And then there's a pink one here that's entirely different. I'm going to go with the pink one. Now I'm going to pull another page out. This is going to be my third one I'm going to show you today. And I have these scraps. Remember, they were all cut different sizes and different lengths. And I want to make sure I can get some of these others on that are much shorter. And so what I'm going to do is make a narrower pocket. And the way I'm going to do that is just put my ruler in the middle, well, not in the middle, but over closer to the middle, and make my tear. As I mentioned previously, I am not making any measurements. I am just kind of eyeballing everything. And that's the nice thing about this particular project is it can be any size you want. You could have real small pockets, or you could use a larger piece of book page, or even something else. You don't have to use a book page to make your project. So it doesn't matter what size it is. You can make them real short. You can make them narrow and tall. The choice is up to you. I decided after I tore the first piece that I wanted it just a little more narrow. So let's fast forward a little bit and get this last pocket put together. At least get all the pieces together. Now you can use other things besides parchment paper for the front of your bag or pocket. I would pick something that you could see through. The parchment paper was the only thing that I had on hand. You could use tissue paper. That would work. You want something that you can show through the pockets to the other side. And you want to make sure that flap comes down over where your parchment paper is coming. Now this is fine for some of my short cardstock pieces. Now let me show you what I did off camera. I went to my sewing machine and I put my book page underneath the sewing machine and sewed the parchment to the book page. What I'm doing now is cutting loose strings off. Now, this is a real old sewing machine, and so some of the stitches aren't real good. Plus, I haven't used it in about 20 years, so you'll have to bear with me with the condition of the stitching. But what I'm doing now is cutting all that excess parchment paper off that we don't need. Now, when I sew this on, there's one thing you have to watch. Make sure your flap is up. You don't want to sew your flap down. And the flap is the piece that has your designer cardstock on top. So I lifted the flap up and sewed it. And then later I came back and I made a stitching around the flap itself, and our cardstock is now attached to the flap. But make sure your flap is up when you do your stitching. And I did different stitching on these three. Now, you'll notice that I have the little bag there with the opening. And what I need to do is pull it down just a little further so that it covers that top a little bit. So I repressed my paper, and I'll go back and I may even take my iron and press it so that it stays down good. But I want to make sure that it covered the top of the parchment paper. Now, this is what we have made. We've made this a little bag or pocket. And if you look at them, you'll see that each one is a different size, and it doesn't matter what size it is. Now, the first one had zigzag stitching. This had, I've forgotten what it was supposed to be, but it's not a very good stitch. It didn't come out good. And what's funny about these stitches, I pushed the button for one, and it printed, then it stitched the one underneath it. So you can tell that the sewing machine is not really cooperating with me. But I was pleased with the stitchings that I got. And after I figured out that it was not picking up the one I chose, but the one underneath, I adjusted for that flaw in my sewing machine to when I did the other two. And here we have our little flap here, and I have not put the flap on this one. The first one that you sew, that I showed you up there, has a stitch all the way around the flap to hold the piece of cardstock down. For this one, I think I'm just going to glue it. To make this pocket a little different, I decided to use this piece of border that was supposed to have a sticker on the back, but I'm going to have to glue it because the stickiness is gone. It's a piece I found in something that someone gave me, and I started to put it over my colorful cardstock, which I kind of like, but I decided this particular one I would just put the trim on it. And so I have some glue here. This is Eileen's Tacky Turbo Glue, and I've put it in a small bottle that has a point, and I'm just drilling a little glue right down the border, and I'll just put it on my flap of my bag here. Okay, I'm just trimming my trim down to size. And that's the second one. Now, if you want to keep it down so that it won't come up at all, what you could do is use a piece of Velcro, but I wouldn't suggest that. I would say do like I'm doing and not put anything. Just press it down good, score it real well. Okay, this particular piece of cardstock that I colored in the last video, I'm just putting it on like it is. I did a zigzag stitch. Actually, I think it's a faggot stitch around it, and I thought it turned out right pretty. And just think, these are those scraps that we worked with last time. Now I'm going to trim the parchment off. Okay, that is done now. And I'm going to put my little top on. And I decided to turn it around. I like the way it looked better the other direction. And I'm afraid my stitching isn't perfect, but it is a homemade object, so we can't expect it to be perfect, especially with a very old sewing machine. Now here are my three bags. Each one's a different size. You notice the one in the middle is kind of wide, and the one on top is very narrow. And there's some more of pieces of cardstock that we decorated last time, and they are here so I can make some more bags. But let's see. Now the next thing I want to do is kind of decorate these little bags, and so they'll be finished for my junk journal. And let's see what we can come up with. I probably won't do much talking, but we'll see what we come up with. I have these birds that are very interesting, and I could put them on the front. Or if I needed to, I can put them inside and have my collection inside one. Otherwise, you can use these bags to hold things that maybe you've cut up, like the birds. I could put the whole stack in one of them, and that would keep them all together and ready to be used. I could use those. But I think I'm going to keep the fronts plain for now. I have this border that is very old, and I really, really like it. And it has the fall colors, so I'm going to clip a little bit off here, and we'll see what we can come up with. Okay, I have this little grouping of leaves. I'm trimming them down just a little bit. And I think that's just as cute as it can be. I still keep finding strings. Next one, I think that's enough on that. You don't want a whole lot if you're putting it inside of a junk journal. And these don't necessarily have to be junk journals. They can be art journals or whatever. Or you can use them, like I said, outside of your journal and just to hold as a means of holding things that you've cut up and you want to kind of keep them grouped together. Okay, let's see here. I've got some stones. I haven't done anything with my stones lately, and I got loads of them. And this has some pink. So I think I'll... Now this particular piece of cardstock that I painted last time, if I remember right, this is a watercolored one. And I put a piece of designer paper that was also a scrap. In fact, I didn't have to do anything to it except glue it on and then cut the length to the right size. It just happened it was a scrap that would work perfectly with this top. Well, I seem to have a little trouble finding what I want here. Let's just kind of fast forward and see what we've got. I picked out 3 stones that go with the paper, but I'm not sure exactly how I want to put that on. So I'm going to skip over to the other one and decorate it first. I've got a butterfly here. I'm going to put it on my little flap. And the butterfly is purple, and if you notice that flap has a lot of purple in it. And you'll see that some of the coloring that you probably didn't like when I was doing it will look better once I put the decoration on it. So we'll put the little butterfly there. He kind of sticks up, but I don't think he's a 3-dimensional, but I don't think he'll be too thick to put in the journal. Now I have my butterfly out, and he's attached to the little flap. And I'm glad I left those 3 stones out because this tab has pink or kind of a reddish color in with the purple. So this is going to be perfect. I'll put the 3 stones on this. Sometimes you have to kind of play with your stash. You might have an idea that you're going to do one thing, and next thing you know, you put it somewhere else. And as usual, you try to do an odd number. So I have 3 stones here, and I will try to get them on. My arthritis doesn't help any, but we will try to get them on here. Now, how does that look? I think that's pretty neat. The little butterfly with the 3 stones. And the second pocket is finished. Now we go back to the other one that did have the stones laid on top of them, but I've used them, so now we've got to find something else. What do you think about buttons? I haven't used buttons in a long time, and I really have a big stash of buttons. And I found 3 brown ones here. They have kind of a little design on top of the button. And so what I'm going to do is just put 3 of them in the corner. And since I have the butterfly in the left corner and the leaves in the left corner, this time I think I'm going to put the 3 buttons in the right corner. So we'll just move them over and see how it looks. And I think that'll be great. Everything is now glued down and in place. And so we started out with coloring our white cardstock and in the first video. And if you haven't seen the first video, 219 coloring white cardstock scraps, please go to it because I showed you 4 different media that you can use. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please come back and see me and see what I have in store for you for next time. In the meantime, have a great crafting day, and don't forget, please subscribe. I hope to see you next time. Bye.